Fantasy Takeaway Podcast with Murphy Hamilton and Joe Pollock. Proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Subscribe, listen, take home the title.
What's up, Takeaway Nation? Welcome into our Week 5 review show. What a weird week it was. Most weeks, fantasy players want a guy that scores 40 points. Who would have seen 5 or so guys did that this week? You have Will Fuller, Christian McCaffrey, Aaron Jones. Hell, Matt Breida still has almost a full game to play, and he's at 25 points. Jeff, Joe, what the hell happened this week?
I mean, Christian McCaffrey was insane, dude. He legitimately, if they didn't throttle it down at the end of that game, could have scored the most points ever in a game for fantasy football.
This whole week has just been an absolute fantasy bonanza, and I love it, except for it really pushed that cash line pretty high on DK.
Yeah, I played in a 280-something person cash game. It was a 50-50, and the cash line was over 200 points. Like, how often do you see that?
Oof, not very.
I just love weeks where if you see a guy going off on your opponent's roster and you start freaking out, you can go, okay, well, I can do something. Like, I watched Christian McCaffrey go bananas, and then I realized I had Will Fuller in my flex. And I was like, oh, there's the kryptonite. There's how I win this week. There's hope.
I just cannot catch that perfect week. And this week it was because I had Will Fuller on my bench.
Shame.
The worst thing when you have a guy like Will Fuller on your bench. It just means your team's stacked, though. That's what that means.
I sat him in 2 spots, and I'm going to go 1-1 in those 2 spots. The one game I lost, if I had played Fuller, I would have won because I played Josh Gordon in what should have been a smash spot against the Redskins. And I deliberated for just what felt like ever on that. And I'm to hell with Josh Gordon. I'm done with that guy.
I agree, man. I will say this, though. If you follow me around in the NFL fantasy football discussion a little bit, I was talking about Will Fuller as a breakout buy low candidate because his air yards were fantastic. His air yards market share was among the elite players, and he just hadn't had that smash game yet. The guy that I'm going to tell you this week that you need to go out and buy is Brandon Cooks. He's coming off of that concussion, and he's still in an elite spot when it comes to air yards market share, when it comes to weighted opportunity rating, when it comes to raw air yards. He's right there. He's top 5, top 6 in everything. So go get yourself some Brandon Cooks because I bet he'll be cheap as all hell, and he's going to break out later in the season.
While we're talking about Will Fuller, I do want to ask you guys your take on the DeAndre Hopkins situation. Right now, a lot of fantasy owners are getting really frustrated with him, and I mean, he's wide receiver 1 capability. So what's going on? What's making Will Fuller the more prime target, especially in this game where they're blowing out Atlanta?
I wouldn't say Will Fuller's been the prime target. He had one blow-up
this
game.
But I said against Atlanta. I specified.
Sure. I think that DeAndre Hopkins is a buy low candidate. I think that there's issues going on that we're not hearing about with some injuries for him. And I think they're just not quite on the same page between him and Deshaun Watson. With Deshaun Watson's trying to change how he plays the game of football. He's trying to drop back faster. He's trying to get the ball out quicker. And I think that him and Hopkins really just need to adjust together. I think it's coming.
Yeah, I think it's going to balance itself out at some point very soon. He should still be considered the alpha dog there. If you can buy him on the cheap, you should. I know I own him in a couple spots. I'm not going to sell him cheap because if someone wants to buy him, they're going to pay me market value or near it. However, you know, they've got to do something because Deshaun Watson right now is so busy either trying to extend a play by moving around the pocket or he's just holding on to the ball too long. He's putting himself in a position where he has to go deep to Fuller and he has to play to those guys. He is getting in his drop back faster, but that might be inhibiting his chemistry with his receivers because now it's disrupting the timing on his other routes.
Sure, I think that they need to change the routes that DeAndre Hopkins is running because Will Fuller's routes were actually short for the most part on his 16 targets. I went back and I watched the game again, and Deshaun Watson didn't take a sack in this game for the first time in a long time. So I think what they're doing is a positive, but I think it's really important that for DeAndre Hopkins that they get him going on some shorter routes, get him going on some slants, like the double moves aren't quite working right now because Deshaun Watson can't get the ball out by the time they've developed.
All right, guys, let's dive into the show. But real quick before we do, because this is fantasy football and I want to rub salt in the wounds, Jeff, Nick Chubb just gained about 5 more points. So.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm just cringing. He had the long run, and then he had a screen that he just caught for a few more yards, and he's probably going to get a touchdown here just to really rub some salt in my eyes.
Oh, I hope so. All right, let's dive in. Let's start the show, guys.
News and notes from across the NFL.
All right, first up, what I've been hoping for about 2 weeks now. The Jay Gruden era has ended in Washington. Gruden, who was let go on Monday morning, leaves with a 35-49-1 record as head coach. They've announced Bill Callahan will be the interim head coach as they begin their long search for a replacement. They are keeping Bruce Allen, though. What do you guys think about their prospects going forward with getting rid of a head coach but not a GM?
Can I do it with a sound effect?
Which sound effect did you want?
That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, man, like this doesn't matter for this year. That team is bad. Maybe they develop later on in the season. They get their rookie quarterback in there. But for now, I think they're pretty much a team you can ignore outside of Terry McLaurin and maybe a running back as a streamer.
Yeah, I'm glad this era's over, but the problem is still Bruce Allen with that organization. As long as he's there calling the shots, they're just going to make another bonehead hire, and they're going to be toiling in mediocrity forever.
All right, next up, semi-breaking news. Right before we started the show, it was announced that Zay Jones has been traded from the Buffalo Bills to the Oakland Raiders for a 5th-round pick, if I'm reading this correctly.
Yeah, it was a 2021 5th-rounder. This is kind of an interesting move because the Raiders' wide receiving group has been really decimated by injuries. They need some bodies, even if they're only lukewarm. The only hope for Zay Jones, if you own him in Dynasty or if you have him rostered for any reason, is that the Raiders will actually put him in the slot and use him where he should be used. Because if they line him up on the outside, it's going to be more of the same that he had in Buffalo. And then at that point, you might as well just go ahead and turn him loose.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think, if they don't put him in the slot, I don't think there's a whole lot of relevance here. But one of the things that it kind of signals to me is that maybe their issues with Tyrell Williams' injury are a little bit more serious than we think.
Well, at least John Gruden can take solace in the fact that Zay Jones will run through a glass door if you ask him to.
Yeah, he's going to do it naked.
Yep. Put some pads on, Zay, next time you jump through a window.
All right, that's all I had for news. Jeff, you had something you wanted to bring up, though, right?
Yeah, so there's been a little bit of chatter, and now that Denver won a game, or another game, I should say, this might get tampened down just a little bit, but Von Miller and Manny Sanders apparently are available for trade. They're not seeking out trades, but apparently they're not telling people no should somebody call. It's kind of an interesting position to be in with two aging veterans on a team that's noticeably getting younger once you get rid of these two guys and Joe Flacco, and maybe a couple parts on that defense. But something if you're in IDP leagues or if you've got Manny Sanders and you're thinking about trading him or cutting him or anything else, you might just keep that stashed away in the back of your mind because a trade could help both of their values.
Totally. And I think that Manny Sanders really needs to go somewhere else. They're not going to compete this year to win the division or get a wild card. As a Broncos fan, you're hoping that Von Miller gets traded, that Manny Sanders gets traded, and also that Chris Harris gets traded, because all of those guys to desperate teams, like Chris Harris to the Eagles, makes more sense than you could possibly imagine. If you get the Eagles to give you a pick, a relatively high pick probably for Chris Harris, you got to do it if you're the Broncos.
Yeah, the trade deadline is going to be a really interesting time. We've had more trades in the last calendar year than we've had in any calendar year in the NFL. And I don't know that officially, but I'm just going to go out on a limb because I've been watching it so long that that's probably true.
Yeah, trades are a rarity in the NFL, and it seems like right now they're definitely moving that way.
It's the Madden generation of GMs.
All right, so that'll do it for news and notes. Let's dive in and review our cheap date lineups from last week. We switched up the format. We did a full DFS roster. We didn't just go with our cheap guys. We threw them in there with higher price players and just tried to build a lineup. Jeff, we're going to start with you because you absolutely dominated us this week. I believe it was almost 70, 80 point difference between you and me, and I was in second.
It was something like that. Yeah, my group looked pretty decent. Returned 4.35x on the group, scored 215.54 points. That'd have been good enough to cash in most games that you're playing on DraftKings. We went over the team obviously last week, but we'll do a quick shoot through. Had Chase Daniel at quarterback, David Johnson and Chris Thompson at running back, DJ Shark, Mike Thomas, Tyler Boyd at wide receiver, Jared Cook at tight end, Dalvin Cook in the flex, and the Chargers defense. I'm actually going to flip to you guys. Who do you want to talk about first? I know we said we were going to spend a little bit of time here, but the whole lineup really kind of killed.
I think that basically we should start with your cheap dates because Chris Thompson was just okay. DJ Chark was your real all-star there at 5,000, giving you 39.4 points. That's almost as much as you can ask for out of a 5K or below player. I really like this lineup. I think that you could have maybe done better with paying up since you had the room for Christian McCaffrey over Dalvin Cook. That would have given you another 20 points, but I really like the lineup. I think that this is something that if you could duplicate nearly every week, you would be in a very, very, very good spot.
I got to agree. Chris Thompson definitely left me feeling a little flat here. And there's some other moves I probably could have made. I was really happy with Jared Cook at tight end, but I could have maybe skipped Dalvin Cook, gone to Christian McCaffrey, skipped the Chargers defense, gone with the Eagles. And there's no reason why this lineup couldn't have been a 250-point lineup.
All right, Joe, let's move on to your lineup next. What do you think you succeeded with this week? Because you had Jeff just blew us out of the water, but I think both you and I had a pretty solid week as far as our cheap dates concerned, right?
Yeah, I think that I could have definitely done better. Duke Johnson only scored me 7.7. Auden Tate was fine at 11.6. You'll take that almost every time as a paydown player like that. He saved his day with a late touchdown, but for DFS, who cares when it happens? The Raiders defense at 8 points was pretty good. Tyler Eifert totally failed me, but he had an end zone target and it was just a good play by the defender. So I think my cheap dates were okay here. My biggest problem on this was that I chose to take Ezekiel Elliott, who only scored me 17.1 points, Julio Jones, who only scored me 7.2, Larry Fitzgerald, who had 11.8. The only thing that saved this week for me was that Kirk Cousins was really pretty darn good for his price, and Christian McCaffrey blew it out of the water.
Yeah, I actually, when we talked about this last week, I liked your lineup a lot. I really liked Tate. McCaffrey obviously is the all-everything guy. I really thought Zeke was going to eat more. Without that touchdown, his day looks really rough. I mean, he only got you 2x, but still, you're expecting more than that out of a Zeke Elliott.
It's weird for him to get game scripted out, but it really kind of was. Like, that game was out of control within the first 10 minutes with Aaron Jones going out and scoring 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. So it's just kind of one of those things you got to chalk up to a loss. Like, I think Ezekiel Elliott is a fine play, and if this makes his price cheaper, I'm still going to be looking at him in DFS.
Yeah, you played Eifert here, and I actually took him in one of I only ran 3 lineups this week, and I used Eifert in one of them. And if I would have just gone with my guy, Jared Cook, instead, that would have been all the difference between making, say, $30 and $50.
Yeah.
It was painful.
All right. And as far as my roster, as we've talked about moving into this DFS format, because I live in Alabama, DFS wasn't legal until this year. I've never actually had any experience doing it. And I can see that looking at this lineup now. I still have a very cheap dates-esque view of this. I'm looking at it more from a week-to-week roster kind of lineup guys I'd be picking up for my cheap dates as opposed to DFS guys. I mean, that's the case for most of these players. Cortland Sutton's got a higher ownership, but he was one of my cheap dates, 19.2. Mohamed Sanu, I really loved him, and he's still getting a ton of targets, ended with 15.3 points. Really, except for my tight end and my defense, my whole roster did pretty well this week. And, of course, Joe, I'll give you the point to do your drop. Gardner Minshew. Minshew. Yeah, 27 points. So we can keep hyping him up for a few more shows.
Absolutely. I hope it never goes away, man. I hope that Gardner Minshew is just a staple in our lives for the rest of time.
Just the new Tom Brady.
Yes. God, that would be awesome. I don't think the new Tom Brady is going to happen on the Jacksonville Jaguars, but who knows?
Yeah, I don't think. His whole situation is reminiscent of him stepping in for Bledsoe, but I don't know that he's necessarily going to achieve those heights.
Murph, one thing I think that we should mention about this lineup that you put out there was you only spent $44,300. And I kind of assumed that was just because you liked a lot of the players, but the players are priced the way that they are for a reason. So if you really want to maximize your upside, I'm not saying you have to spend $50,000 on the dot every week, because look at Jeff's lineup. He maximized pretty well and he was at 49.5. Maybe he could have done a little better to spend up by a few dollars, but if you're down below 45,000, you can really find a place to sneak in some really elite plays like Michael Thomas was this week, as opposed to maybe the Mohamed Sanu play.
Yeah, and Sanu wasn't even an awful play. I mean, he got you over 3.5x, but if you could have maybe gone out there and said, okay, well, I can put in Sanu, or I can put in, maybe it's Mike Thomas, or maybe you drop Keenan Allen and Sanu and you go ahead and put in, McCaffrey and somebody else. Like that could have drastically changed this lineup and the way it looks. But yeah, definitely don't leave that much money on the table. You can leave a little, but don't leave 10% of it.
I also want to address one other thing on my lineup that you guys talked about in the last episode, And you were wondering why I didn't stack quarterback because I played Lindsey and Sutton. And Joe Flacco, again, is why I didn't stack quarterback.
I mean, Joe Flacco.
Just a little defensive myself on that one.
Sure, but yeah, you just still didn't cash on anything.
I mean, it's fine, but it could have been way worse. Could have been way worse.
As a game theory situation, I still would suggest if you're going to play that many players on the same team to take the quarterback too.
Yeah, that's more about process than anything else. And, just because you have the process right and you have the right formula doesn't mean you're always going to win. What it means is that you're going to have a better chance to win week to week to week versus, say, going with disjointed roster constructions and not really having a plan. Because if you don't have a plan every week and you're just kind of randomly picking players, you're going to be disappointed more weeks than not.
All right, so final recap. Jeff, you ended with 215.54 points. Joe, 141.04. And me with 147.46. Jeff, again, dominated us. But the real silver lining here is that Joe was in third again.
Again? Was I in third last week? Didn't I beat you last week?
Whoa. I'm talking about for the season. There's very few times where we put you in your place at the bottom. We've done it twice now in the last 3 weeks.
Okay. Now you've motivated me even further.
Oh, man.
That was a terrible idea.
I motivated you for our listeners, Joe. That's what I did. I'm doing
angry,
successful
Joe
things
Smash.
on this show.
Booth review.
All right, moving into our booth review section. This is where we take our what to watch fors last week and break them down. Joe, starting with you.
I was watching that Bengals-Cardinals game, and Auden Tate did pretty well. Larry Fitzgerald was another guy that I was watching, and he did have a target inside the 5-yard line, didn't get it. I mean, he caught the ball, but they stopped him short of the goal line. I was kind of disappointed in this game. It turned out to be pretty close to the over-under that Vegas had set, but Andy Dalton looked terrible through about 3/4 of the game. Kyler Murray, he had some nice runs that really propped up his day, but he looked pretty lost for most of the game. I was expecting a lot more offense with defenses this bad, and it just kind of fell flat for me. Tyler Boyd was amazing, but outside of him, I really wasn't excited about anybody.
All right, Jeff, you're next. What was your first what to watch for?
I was looking for the Vikings. They really needed to get right game against the Giants, and they did what they were supposed to do. Now they need to start building some momentum towards next week. We also need to see Diggs get a little more involved. You had, Dalvin Cook had a huge day, 21 for 132. He also kicked in 6 for 86 through the air. Adam Thielen, 7 for 130 and 2 scores. You've got a couple of games on the docket that should be pretty helpful to them really getting this offense clicking again with the Eagles, Lions, and Redskins on deck. It might be just the kick in the shorts this group needed to start getting the fantasy points that we would all expect them to have.
All right, we're back around to me. The first one I was watching was that Chargers-Broncos game, and really it was what would Eckler's usage be with Gordon back, and Eckler is still fantasy viable. I did say that this would take a few weeks to shake out, and I stand by that. I'm not trying to overreact to this, but 16 targets, 15 receptions. 3 carries for 7 yards, that's whatever. But if he's going to be used in the passing game, I'll be just fine keeping Austin Eckler on my rosters. And if you bought low on him, then you might have just gotten a gem. PPR format, Eckler's still very, very useful. Flex, running back 2 worthy right now.
I think one of the bigger stories here is just how inefficient Melvin Gordon was in the running game, because he was absolutely terrible. And this offense had been producing chunk plays in the running game all season long. I'm not saying that I think Austin Eckler is a better all-around running back than Melvin Gordon, but I think there are a few things that he does much better than Melvin Gordon does. And goal line work certainly isn't one of those things. So I think these guys both have some value on this team. But I would be absolutely shocked if we see a situation where Melvin Gordon starts getting 70, 80% of the work and Austin Eckler drops to 10 or 20. Because it doesn't look to me like there's an appreciable difference between them. And I think sometimes Melvin Gordon might even be the worst running back.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I actually think Gordon is a less efficient back. He's more of a hammer, and he can do a few things that Eckler can't. But in today's NFL, Eckler's a little more well-rounded, and I tend to like him better. It's just one of those situations where he can give you that spark you need when you really need something on 2nd and long or in a reasonably long 3rd down situation. So, give me Eckler all day. And if you did buy him cheap, man, that is a heck of a gem to have on your roster right now.
Is there a world where Melvin Gordon is available at the trade deadline?
Yeah, we're living in it right now.
I hope he gets traded. Man, would that be awesome to watch.
where would you want to see him go?
I mean, there are some situations that are running back needy. I know that Washington drafted Geis, but he looks like he might never get his career off the ground. And a straight up trade with Melvin Gordon going there and Adrian Peterson coming over with a pick would keep that good goal line back in their offense in Los Angeles with the Chargers. And it would be a significant upgrade for Washington. I think you'd have to have a sign and trade kind of deal where he signed a long-term deal, but that would be pretty good.
Bruce Allen's just dumb enough to not actually do a sign and trade and just think he's going to re-sign him in the offseason.
God, that would be stupid.
I mean, this is the same guy who forgot Kirk Cousins' name.
What about Indianapolis? Indianapolis seems like a pretty good landing spot, and it really feels like Marlon Mack's injury problems have been an issue. They haven't been all that efficient running the football.
I don't know. Marlon Mack looked pretty decent last night. So did Naheem Hines. I think they like their little two-headed monster, and they really like all their cap room. Yeah, that offensive line could make anybody look good. Yeah, Quentin Nelson, he's a monster. I was watching him just turn everybody around all night last night, or Sunday night. And Melvin Gordon goes there. He'd be great, but I don't think it's a pressing need for them. But I could see where you're coming from.
What about Houston? Houston would be pretty nice.
Oh, Houston would be real good. But, I mean, they already gave away all
you
their
could just trade him for Carlos Hyde and a pick.
Well, I mean, they could probably do that. How many picks does Houston have left?
Like 2, but may as well just get rid of the whole draft if you're going to go that route.
Just give him a Ricky Williams trade. Trade him your entire 2021 draft. That's the only place you have any picks. You know, then when Bill O'Brien gets fired, he can laugh at the next guy who's got no trade capital and no cap room.
Are we watching a kicker that's going to get fired this week again? Do we lose 2 kickers this week?
It's possible. We signed him to a contract with enough guaranteed money. We're stuck with Mr. Gold, unfortunately.
All right, back on the rails. Jeff, what was your second what to watch for?
Well, it was actually this game. So we were going to have to sit tight until Monday night because, this offense had a lot of questions to answer still. Is Tevin Coleman going to matter? Well, guess what? He's got a touchdown already. How does that affect the other running backs? Well, Matt Breida's already got 2 touchdowns already. What are we going to do with Jimmy G? Is he going to be a quarterback that's worth rostering at any point? Jury's still out there. But, this 49ers team can be pretty dangerous through the rest of the season. They had an early bye, so a lot of their players could be targets during all of the remaining bye weeks. Definitely worth seeing how they play against the talented Cleveland Browns.
I think that the Cleveland Browns front versus the 49ers front, offense to defense, is the biggest story in this game. And I knew it was going to be coming in. Cleveland is not good up front offensively, and this is a borderline elite front four for the 49ers. They're showing it completely so far in this game.
And this is a big-time coming-out party for Nick Bosa.
Yeah, just some little fun stats for you, Jeff, at the half. Matt Breida, 3 carries for 88 yards and a touchdown, 3 catches as well. And Tevin Coleman, 7 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown. So the running game is very healthy.
Yeah, looks really good. It was one of the situations where I thought it might be an either-or, Breida or Coleman, but you might be okay with both.
All right, so it's back to me, and I was watching that Bills and Titans game, and it was very boring, 7-14. The defenses kind of held that game to a slow, well-paced, old-school football game. I liked what I saw out of Josh Allen. Marcus Mariota is still without a turnover. That's an amazing stat because you wouldn't expect that from Marcus Mariota. Both teams still have a lot to show. I don't think this was a great game for them, but I'm still hopeful. I'm still kind of on the Bills bandwagon a little bit. I like the team, and I think they're going to go at least into the wild card.
John Brown might have been one of the biggest stories in that game. He was really good against a really solid defense.
On my bench everywhere.
Me too. I benched him everywhere. Like, you just can't play him in that matchup unless you're totally desperate. But he's turning into a guy that might be totally matchup proof in your flex.
Yeah, get you a solid 14 to 17 points, even in a bad matchup. All right, Joe, we're going to end it with you. You had Thursday Night Football, correct?
Thursday Night Football, and the biggest takeaway from that was that Jeff thought it was going to go under 42, and he bet $5,000 of his budget for our next week's cheap dates, and it was at 59.
Wah, wah, wah.
Got to build a Murphy lineup next week, huh?
And I'm fine with that. That's okay.
Yeah.
Don't make me beat you with one of your own lineups now. Calm down.
Oh, no. As long as you beat Joe, I think I'm okay with it.
That's going to be a tough task. Tough task with no money.
See, Joe wanted the third voice to help balance our fantasy experience out, but really it's just going to be ganging up on Joe on this show from now on.
Joe, we're coming after you.
I mean, if you guys start being right all the time and then ganging up on me, it's going to be a bad look for you.
Well, now, wait a second. Let's tally these up here. I'm pretty sure I've won twice on cheap dates already this season. Murphy's won twice.
That's what I'm saying. You guys are totally up against me, and I'm the one you're bullying me. right now.
I don't know. I mean, is it bullying? Is it bullying? It doesn't feel like bullying.
I feel like I've performed much in the way that your little brother that got hit in the head when he was young has performed in his life. And you guys are treating me like I beat up on you all the time.
I mean, let's be clear. I had 6 years on him, so hitting him in the head was a lot easier than it would look. So
I just pictured you as little Nicky. Embrace the good.
The takeaway.
All right, on to the takeaway. Things that we didn't mention in our booth reviews, things that we weren't watching for, but popped out at us. Joe, you have quite a few things to talk about on this, don't you?
I really just want to talk about one major thing with a few examples. Why are we still predicting game flow and using it to talk about the players that we like or dislike in a week? Like, are we really that good at predicting how these games are going to come out that we should base our fantasy decisions on them? A lot of people in the industry were off the Patriots because they thought it was going to be an early blowout. Tom Brady ends up throwing for 300 plus yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, the Redskins were pretty much in it until middle of the second quarter. Look at the Broncos Chargers. We thought that was going to be a blowout. Everyone in the industry was talking about how the Chargers were going to blow the Broncos out and you couldn't use any of the players from either side because you didn't know what was going to happen with Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. Totally false narrative. Packers, Cowboys. Packers jump out early. Ezekiel Elliott's totally dead in a smash spot. Like, we just got to stop predicting game flow and start talking about the players that are in good spots, because the game flow, it matters a lot, but we're bad at predicting it collectively as an industry.
I'd be interested to see if there's any real data on like what the fantasy community thinks is going to happen and then what really happens when it comes to game flow, because this was a particularly strange week. And I think that could be, pointed at almost every game. You could be like, well, that's weird. That's weird. That's weird. And there was so many of those games that were weird. So I'm with you. I don't think that we should be trying to predict game flow and making that the end all be all of our fantasy decisions. But there's some real logic to it. I mean, at the end of the day, if the Patriots and Redskins play that game 100 times, how many times are the Patriots going to blow out the Redskins?
Every single time. But that doesn't mean that Tom Brady isn't going to have pretty darn good stats in 60, 70, 80 of those 100 games.
Well, yeah, and you should still be playing the quarterbacks, obviously, because even in a smash spot like that, if you're going to say, hey, look, the Patriots are going to hang 40 on these guys, well, yeah, Brady's going to have 3 or 4 touchdowns. Like, you can count on that. And that should be part of the projection process. But what really concerns me, what made it such a weird week and a weird fantasy game, I think, for a lot of folks, was that there were guys we've never heard of catching those touchdowns. Like, there was
Brandon Bolden. I actually predicted the Brandon Bolden touchdown almost to a T, how it happened, on the Roto Bros DFS podcast that I released as a bonus episode on our channel.
Well, congratulations. Did you call the Izzo touchdown that nobody saw coming? Because that definitely didn't help anybody anywhere.
Definitely not. But I'll take my celebration.
Well, if you didn't have, did you have Bolden rostered anywhere?
No, nobody has Bolden rostered anywhere.
Then it doesn't matter.
Well, out there, Bill Belichick has a fake identity to play fantasy, and he had Brandon Bolden as his running back 1 this week.
That SOB.
You know it.
I know he did. Well, he's probably the guy that hit the million in DK.
Because he doesn't need the million at all.
That guy.
God.
He does it just to mess with us.
It's not that he hates our fantasy teams. We figured it out. He doesn't hate our fantasy teams. He just loves his.
That's it. And you know what? We've been calling him Bella cheats for so long that maybe that's what it is. It's not so much that it's Bella cheats. It's Bella cheats for his fantasy team.
All right. I got 2 takeaways, and they're both kind of minor. The first one, and I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my horn because of injury, but Pat Mahomes. We are in week 5 now. He has had a, 2 or 3 week stretch? 2-week stretch. He had the first 3 good weeks, and now he's on a 2-week stretch where he scored 1 touchdown. He's having some bad issues. I kind of want to point out when people were like, he's not going to regress. You can't.
I'm calling on this completely, Murphy.
Whoa.
He has a high ankle sprain. You can't take a victory lap on a guy with a high ankle sprain.
I am not taking a victory lap because of his injury. I'm taking a victory lap because you are drafting a second-year player in the sometimes 2nd and 3rd round. You don't know how he's going to play through injury. I know for a fact how certain players will play through injury because they've been in the league for 5 to 10 years. With Pat Mahomes, you're drafting him with that high of a pick, and you're seeing now that there are instances where he will regress. I'm believing that he'll come back in 1 or 2 weeks and have a dominating 4-touchdown game. He'll be great for your fantasy team, but will he get another high ankle sprain later in the season and be this bad? It's worrisome. And I want to point out that you could have gotten Russell Wilson like you were touting, 6-7 rounds later, and he's number one right now in fantasy.
I got Russell Wilson in double-digit rounds in most of the leagues where I drafted him in, so I can totally get on board with that. But like, we're talking about a player that experienced a fluke injury in week 1, and that is probably the biggest factor.
I'm not bagging on the injury.
He also lost his number one wide receiver to an injury. Like, I love talking about how you shouldn't draft a quarterback in round 1 or 2, but I can't let you take a victory lap on Patrick Mahomes regressing because of the injuries that happened.
If his ADP had been like round 5, I would have not said a word on this show. But being round 2, round 3, that's why I'm saying something.
Guys,
take a wide receiver, take a running back.
Really, really important note here is that with his high ankle sprain, if you're going to take a victory lap, at least you'll beat him.
Oh,
oh man!
I've been holding that in for a couple minutes now. I had to get that one out.
Sounds painful, Jeff.
Well, that's why I let it out, man. I just couldn't hold it anymore.
My other takeaway is that the NFL is absolutely insane if they let Adam Gase continue to be a head coach.
I mean, let's give him a little bit of a pass. He has Luke Falk as a quarterback right now. Let's wait until Darnold comes back to put him in his grave.
All right, I'll wait, and then I'll put him in his grave in week 9.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, I think you need some of his defense back too, actually. That whole team, basically, they're all in the trainer's room right now. It's pretty ugly.
All right, Jeff, any takeaways for you?
You know, there's one that I'm sitting on here, and I know that we've kind of beaten this one to death a little bit the last few weeks, but what about Mike Evans? He goes out and gives you a giant goose egg this week, and do the Buccaneers need him? Is Chris Godwin's success predicated on the idea that Mike Evans is drawing a number 1 corner, or he's drawing away enough attention where Godwin's winning because of positive matchups? Or can they turn his contract loose after next season, I think, and be on the hook
for nothing? Is Godwin this year's juju? Is what you're asking?
Well, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. And I love Chris Godwin. I think that he profiles to me as a future number 1. He can be that alpha dog. But we don't know right now how he would play without Evans. But, I mean, Evans is hurting a lot of folks fantasy-wise right now because, I mean, you've got to actually consider benching him in some spots.
Yeah, I only own Evans in 1 league, and I own Godwin in 5, so I hope it continues, really, because I don't care all that much about the one where I do own him, and my wide receiver depth is pretty good, but I feel like a lot of people are in the same situation as I am in that league, and you kind of want to just cut him loose. You kind of want to trade him low, and I never support trading a guy low. But next time he blows up, I think I'm going to have him out there with some offers on the table and see what I can get.
After his massive game, I traded him for Nick Chubb.
That's
super
sweet.
Happy about
That's
that.
a really good deal.
Yeah. There's, I actually moved Evans in a dynasty league last season. And I'll be honest, I don't remember the exact terms of the trade, but I remember watching a game where Godwin only caught like 2 passes. This was last season. And I said, yeah, I don't know. I like that Godwin kid. I got to get out from underneath Evans. And I moved him last year. And I got a haul for him. I don't remember all the parts, but then in the offseason, I used some of those parts to get Godwin. And so it worked out pretty well. Basically traded Evans for Godwin plus some draft picks effectively.
For those keeping score at home on this whole Chris Godwin is not the 1A, that's ridiculous. For those of you on Twitter, Chris Godwin is the wide receiver number 1 in PPR with 120 points, and Mike Evans is wide receiver 14. I think it's going to get closer as the season goes on, but people who called that take unreasonable, I don't know. I kind of want him to eat some crow.
Chris Godwin's the wide receiver 1, and Tyler Lockett is a glorified punt returner, Joe.
Tyler Lockett's wide receiver 9. I can't believe like all these people, I'm all off season. I'm saying Tyler Lockett is going to get more volume because you're included in this, Jeff. I said Tyler Lockett's going to get more volume because he's taking over the Doug Baldwin role. He's got 36 targets 5 weeks in, caught 30 of them, maintained his efficiency effectively, and he's wide receiver 9.
Yeah, he's having a hell of a year. And hey, I'll be first to admit when I'm wrong. And I definitely didn't see it coming. I didn't think he'd be a top 24 wideout. I just wasn't sure. And again, we're in week 5 here. So it's still early and there's plenty of time for this thing to go completely sideways. But right now, if he keeps this pace, I mean, you can't not love the guy. So I just wasn't on the bandwagon. I didn't love the build. Didn't love the kind of, schoolyard style that Seattle seems to run with when it comes to their passing game. The volume doesn't ever really seem to be there as an offense. So, yeah, I couldn't really get behind it. But no, I think the Godwin thing, I was all about. I think he's got really great size. He's got great attributes. He's one of those guys that he can win and beat you in a lot of different ways. That's what qualifies him as kind of that alpha dog wideout one. But I remember talking to some folks on Twitter and saying, hey, this time next year, we're going to be talking about Godwin as the wide receiver 1 in Tampa, not Mike Evans. And I got lambasted for that one. And, I'm just hoping this continues so that I can kind of, take my victory lap and, hopefully he doesn't have a high ankle sprain because I don't want to win that lap.
So far, the only thing that was wrong about he could be the wide receiver 1 in Tampa was in Tampa.
Yeah. I should have said he's going to be the wide receiver 1, period. That would have really gotten fried.
Everyone would have absolutely crucified you for that one.
I still have the burn marks from
I still think it's a bad
before.
take. For the record, I don't think that Chris Godwin is going to end the season as the wide receiver 1, but it's certainly possible.
Yeah, he's looking really, really good. And there's got to be a couple more weeks where Mike Evans is going to pop. And if you've got him on your roster right now and he has another huge week, it might be a good time to shop him and see if you can catch somebody who's going to chase those points.
Tapping the wire.
All right, our last segment to round out the show, we're going to tap the wire, look at the waiver wire, let you guys know who to pick up. Let's start with quarterbacks. Not really a lot of people to mention here. I want to mention Gardner Minshew just because he's still under 50%.
I miss you.
I love that Jeff decided to dance like a girl at a preteen concert.
I did.
In the air.
Oh, I definitely did.
Yeah.
Eyes were closed and everything. I was like, oh, yeah.
You were getting into that. Your soul was in that song.
Dude, oh, yeah. Just lost myself in it.
But yeah, Gardner Minshew, under 50% ownership. You people are crazy. Pick him up. He's a solid quarterback. That's obvious by this point. Jeff, let's jump to you. Joe already said he didn't have anybody for this segment, but you are handling streamers. Do you have any streamer quarterbacks?
I've got one, and he's not particularly well owned. And if you happen to have one of those guys that's off this upcoming week, you're already streaming quarterbacks. So maybe a target for you might be Marcus Mariota. You alluded to the fact that he hasn't had any turnovers yet to this point in the year. I want to say he has 9 touchdowns, which is pretty decent, respectable. He had a couple 3 touchdown games, if I'm not mistaken. And it's not so much that he has great matchups, but if we're going ahead and predicting game flow, Joe,
Yeah,
we can expect the Titans to be throwing a little bit against Dallas. And it might be a really decent spot for him to pick apart a secondary that's been getting worked over a little bit recently. And A.J. Brown might just be that guy to pick up a few of those points. So if you're really desperate at wide receiver, maybe he's worth a stash spot too.
All right, let's move into running backs. I don't really have any obvious pickup for running backs. So, Joe, any low-owned guys you want to mention?
Well, I think that these guys may be handcuffs, maybe a little bit more, but Chase Edmonds has been getting some pretty good opportunity in that Arizona offense. And Reggie Bonifant seems like he's emerging as the handcuff out there in Carolina. So he's a guy to keep your eye on. I wouldn't pick Reggie Bonifant up, but I think in deeper leagues, I would consider rostering Chase Edmonds because right now he's a break glass in case of emergency flex play, but he could also become a very valuable asset if David Johnson were to go down. The one guy I would pick up, and he's owned in something like 10% of leagues across all platforms, is Ito Smith. Ito Smith got 6 targets this last week. It seems like he's emerging as the pass-catching running back, and that defense for Atlanta is terrible, so they are going to be throwing the ball quite a bit. Even if they're not a terrible defense, they're still going to be throwing the ball quite a bit. 47.3% snap share. I don't know how this thing's going to shake out, but I think Ito Smith is a guy worth owning.
I like that Ito Smith take. I'm all about that. I think that's pretty good. I'm going the handcuff route too. And, Dalvin Cook has been absolutely crushing, but lost in that is that Alexander Madison's starting to get more and more touches. And he's been pretty productive on those touches. So if anything should happen to Dalvin, if you're a Dalvin owner, you need to go have Madison and get him on your roster pretty quickly. I'm not predicting injury. That's not what we're doing here, but he's a viable guy that you might be able to plug in if you have another back on a bye and you need to say, get yourself 7-8 points. Madison could just be the guy you need. And the bonus here is that Kittle touchdown.
Yes.
Sorry, guys.
Yes. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that heads up.
The bonus here is that Madison is also the handcuff to Dalvin Cook. Anything happens to him, you're going to have the one running back in Minnesota, and they want to keep it on the ground.
All right, moving into wide receivers. Auden Tate was somebody you guys talked about a lot on the last show, Jeff and Joe. Gonna throw him out there. He had a pretty good game. We talked about 11 points. Mohamed Sanu still at 47% ownership, and he's getting a lot of targets. So somebody definitely want to pick up there if you are wide receiver needy. And Michael Gallup, 68% ownership. So go check your waiver wire. If he's there, he's worth a stash. He's been pretty good, minus that period of time where he was hurt. When he's in the game, when he's on the field, he's pretty solid fantasy gold. Joe, you got any low-owned guys you want to throw out there?
I do have a couple. I'm not thrilled about this one, but James Washington has been on an upward trend with his weighted opportunity over the last 4 weeks. I think Deontay Johnson is obviously the wide receiver 2 to own based on snap share and target share in that offense. But in deeper leagues, I think James Washington is a guy that's worth a look. Willie Snead also is not too bad. He had a 3% target share in week 2. It's up to 18% this last week in week 5. So Willie Snead, if they're going to be, it looks like that defense isn't quite as good as we thought. So they might be throwing the ball a little more than we expected in Baltimore, and Willie Snead seems to be part of it. So I don't love either of those two pickups, but in deeper leagues, I think they could have some value.
All right, moving into tight ends, I've got Gerald Everett and Chris Herndon, who is returning from that suspension. Shout out to South Alabama for Gerald Everett, their first ever draft pick. I'm super excited to talk about him whenever we get a chance. He's
good, man. He's really a good football player. And he was one of those guys. I built these spreadsheets, and I won't bore you too much with what they do, but they show risers in weighted opportunity, in air yards, and in snap count. And last week, he was one of the guys that was on all 3 of the lists. So he's a guy that he's really on an upward trajectory. And if you got him last week before the blow up, good on you. But I would still go out and get him because I think that he is a part of that offense, and he's a guy that's going to get opportunity, especially with the way that offense is changing now that the opposing defenses have adjusted a little bit.
You know, a guy that we kind of left off here, I didn't really have a tight end that I loved. That's kind of that low-owned guy, but Chris Herndon's coming off suspension, and he might be available in a league near you. So with Darnold getting healthy, God willing, Herndon coming back, this Jets offense could look very, very different than it has the last few weeks here. And it could mean really good things for your fantasy lineup. I'm not saying go grab Darnold, but Herndon might be a guy we're stashing as a tight end 2 or as a, emergency style guy in a week or 2.
I like Herndon too. A couple of the lower owned guys. Dawson Knox is a great deeper league stash that we really didn't talk about here. And the other tight ends in that offense got a lot of work this past week, but I think Dawson Knox is still the guy out of those 3 guys that would be in consideration in Buffalo. And Foster Moreau. Darren Waller has been getting all the talk, but Foster Moreau's weighted opportunity has increased in each of the last 4 weeks. As long as Zay Jones doesn't come in and command a massive target share right when he gets there, I think that Foster Moreau could be a decent, really, really deep league stash. He might end up being pretty valuable at some point.
I like that. I've actually got Moreau stashed in one dynasty league. I was able to snag him in, and I've just got him buried as like my tight end 4.
All right, that'll do it for this episode. Our week 5 review is in the books. Jeff, Joe, good one. Good show, guys.
I thought it was fun. Sorry I had to cry when you guys made fun of me.
It's all right, buddy. I didn't mean to trigger you.
Yeah, it's cool.
You snowflake.
I'm used to winning all the time. Sorry.
Whoa, Jeff's here. Those days are over.
Don't put that pressure on me. Don't put that pressure on me, Murph.
It's coming now.
Well, with our powers combined, Jeff, I'm just saying it's not just me now. With our powers combined, we are Captain Screwjoe.
We're like the Wonder Twins now. Are we going to get like some fancy uniforms? Maybe like a ring or something? Like, how do we do this?
Yeah, matching rings. It's in the mail.
Yeah, okay. There you go. Give you one of those. Little fist bump through the little camera there.
Oh, God.
Yes, embarrassing Joe. This is the whole point of this show. All right, we will be back on Thursday with our usual flow, or what to watch for is the injury roundup, all the good stuff, and hopefully a couple less Jeff jokes, but we can't make any promises.
No, there won't be less Jeff jokes. Get that out of here.
All right, for Jeff at NFL_DiMatteo, for Joe at Human Stat Sheet. Don't ever change that, Joe. I saw that on Twitter. You and Mark are trying to change it.
I wasn't going to change it anyway. I didn't agree to that. I did not agree to that.
All right. And of course, for myself at Murphy FFT, or find us all in the NFL Fantasy Football Discussion Group on Facebook. See you on Thursday. Bye, guys.
Later.
Let's go Niners.
No, come on, Jeff. Cop out.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And follow the show on Twitter at FF Takeaway.
We're winning 28-3. We're winning 28-3. Come on, man. Let me get excited about my team. We've been so bad for a while.
Whoa. We can't get excited about our team, so neither can you.
Hey. No one loves the Broncos. Cut it out. It's only because nobody loves Joe Flacco. I actually hate Joe Flacco with pretty much every fiber of my being.